Good afternoon to you, snooker fans, and welcome to the latest episode of the 15 Red podcast with myself, Scott McCarter, here in County Tyrone in Northern Ireland. And I'm joined once again by my wonderful co host, Kelly Barker in London. Good afternoon to you, Kelly.
Good afternoon, Scott. Hope you're doing well, and hope you had a good week last week enjoying the Saudi Arabia Masters, which was almost every bit as dramatic and good to watch as last year's.
Yes, a tremendous week in Saudi Arabia. Congratulations to Neil Robertson. Of course, we will get on to that in a moment, but I gather, well, I know, Kelly, that we've had some rather sad news to begin the episode with this week. So if you wanted to just fill us in there.
Yes, sadly, it's been another a snooker death. Unfortunately, we lost Geoff Foulds last week, father of Neil, who's such a prominent figure in the broadcasting world these days, former world number three himself. But Geoff was a very good player himself in his younger days, and Neil credits everything that he is these days in snooker to his dad, and yeah, so that's a sad loss. They played each other many years ago on Neil's way to winning his first tournament, his only ranking tournament, and yeah, it's the first father-son tie we ever had in a ranking tournament. So I'm sure that's a great memory for Neil. And yeah, I must admit, I didn't know too much about Geoff's playing days. They were long before my time. But yeah, it's very sad to lose another figure in snooker. And condolences to Neil and all the family at this time.
Yes, a very sad time. Of course, first and foremost, we, as you say, send our condolences and sympathies to Neil. Will be keeping him in our thoughts and prayers at this time. It's a terrible thing to lose your father at any age. But yes, I suppose Jeff's playing days aren't as well known. All I would have picked up would be, the old story that Neil would have told on television and so on. I always remember, I think the first time he came to the Crucible, Jeff took him in 1979. I think they were down, might have been down supporting John Virgo or something, because John Virgo was playing in London, sort of near them at the time. So that was straight. Actually, I was looking, you and I were, well, I was looking sort of before we came on air about that 1986 International Open. Neil won 5-0, made breaks of 73, 53, and 69, and outscored his father 475 points to 86. So,
Well, I'm sure that was one defeat that Geoff could take on the chin when it was losing to Neil.
very much so. And, you know, as Neil has said, everything that he owes to his father. And I would say that Neil has turned out to be a real credit to him, both as a player and a broadcaster. So his legacy lives on.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Geoff was very proud of Neil, the player and the broadcaster, and as a son. So
Yeah.
yeah, we send all our condolences, and yeah, let's move on to the Saudi Arabia then, Scott.
Oh, Saudi Arabia. A week. Where do you start, really? I mean, obviously, we can't go through everything. There was 144 players. We'll be here to this time next week. But uh, it's just whatever the sort of objections that people had, we might touch on, crowd numbers and so on later. But the actual snooker itself, just every day there was something going on. Tremendous.
Yes, it was really enjoyable, and I think we're in for a great season ahead if Shanghai is anything to go by, and now the tournament. But yeah, I just made a few notes from the early rounds because there was so much to get through. One of the early days, we had Tepchire on new making a 147 and putting himself in line for that £50,000 prize. As we'll touch on later, he didn't actually go home with all that money. But yeah, great start for him. And sadly, he didn't reach the later rounds. But on the very first evening of the tournament, we rolled back the years because Ken Doherty beat Jimmy White 4-1.
Yes.
Jimmy didn't play his best, unfortunately, and Ken was the better player. Um, but yeah, they first met in 1991, apparently, as professionals. So,
Yeah.
for both of them to still be going strong or strongish at this age and all these years later, it was really something to enjoy watching those two on the table together.
Yes, I mean, how many more of those sort of matches are we going to get? Because very often with those sort of matches, you know, obviously the result's relevant to who goes further in the tournament, but in the grand scheme of things, the result isn't that relevant as such. But the fans just love to see them, and it was just wonderful.
Absolutely, and I think those two spend a lot of time together these days doing, the exhibitions and things here and there, and yeah, you always guaranteed a good turnout when those two play each other. Um, but yeah, this was Ken's day, and moving on. I thought a word for Rhiannon Evans was worth a mention. She had a good
Yeah.
couple of wins in the early rounds, and she's really started the season very well in ranking tournament. And she won 2 rounds here. The second round was a win over Liam Davis 4-2, which I thought was a very notable win for her because Liam is a very good player.
Yes, Liam, one of the real up and coming good Welsh prospects. So, we know what the Stucker heritage is like in Wales. So that is quite a scalp for Rianne because, you know, people might think it's rather controversial that the ladies have turf cards. Now, I'm all in favour of it. But, she is certainly starting to justify that on merit as well.
Absolutely. And, she's qualified for Wuhan next week. She's qualified for the British Open. She's already made more waves this season so far, I think, than she did in the whole of the time she's had a tour card before. So it's great to see her doing this well. And
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, moving on to the last 32, which is where the top 16 players came into the tournament. And the
Yeah.
biggest casualty of this round, Scott, was your local boy, Mark Allen. He did lose, I think it was 6-5 to Chang Bing Yu, who has been away from the tour, but is back on now. And he is a very promising Chinese prospect. I think we know why he was away, same as Xing
Yes.
Tong. But
Yeah.
he's back now, second chance, and he's another one who started the season pretty well.
Yes, and obviously we'll come to what happened to him later on, but you know, I didn't actually get to see that match against Mark, but clearly Mark's maybe not quite in the form you would have expected. Obviously pulled out of Shanghai. Uh, just personally, obviously, it's a concerning start for him, but well played, Chang. He must have played reasonably well.
Yes, and this was Mark's first match of the season because I think he got a bye into Wuhan final stages, so he didn't have to play the qualifier. Didn't need to play the qualifier at the British Open. Um, didn't enter the Championship League. Didn't play in the Shanghai. So this was Mark's first outing this season. Disappointing to lose so early on, but hopeful. I mean, one thing we know with Mark is he is a devil for putting the time in on the practice table, and
Yes.
we know he'll be hard at it for the next event, and hopefully he'll come better then because. Last season probably wasn't the season he really wanted. He was a little bit down on the one before, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's fallen down the rankings slightly. But what a player when he's playing well, and I'm sure he will be back.
Oh yes. I mean, like you can imagine, like whenever he plays well, it's glorious in this household. But it's just at the moment those days seem to be fewer and further between. But he could get there again. We know what he's like. He's a real battler, so he can do it again.
I'm sure he will. And also in the last 32, a mention for Stephen Hallworth, who came all the way through from round one to the last 32. So he won 4 rounds to claim, well, I think the £20,000 for that round was probably hit. Well, it must have been his biggest payday. Unfortunately, then for him, he was blitzed 5-0 by Zing Tong, but Zing Tong looked very, very sharp and looks like the world champion in that round.
And of course, compensation for Stephen. He was in the commentary box for most of the rest of it. So, you know,
Yes, so he
it's
was there for the
entirely
week.
terrible.
No, and I think he certainly enjoyed his time over there as well. They talk about the hospitality and just the pictures we saw online. It looks a hell of a place to be for the week.
Yeah.
So, coupled with the good feeling of getting to the last 32, it's a very promising time for him. But moving on to the last 16, you probably saw most of these matches, Scott. Neil Robertson beat Mark Selby 6-4, which was a very good game. I thought Selby didn't play badly. Robertson did play very well and he did deserve it. It was a little slow going actually. I watched this one. It was a little slow going early on, but once Neil got anywhere near towards the winning line, he was up for it and he made his move. And so yeah, he deserved that. Also, Mark Williams beating Sean Murphy 6-1. This was some glorious snooker from Mark.
Yeah.
Murphy was perhaps a touch rusty, maybe, but I don't think he had that much chances. But Mark was looking in great nick in that one.
Well, I suppose from Sean's point of view, I suppose he'd beaten Tep Chaya, wasn't it 5-0 in the previous round? So therefore, Tep Chaya hadn't really opposed him. So therefore, because he hadn't really got much opposition, he probably didn't know where his game was at in a sense. And then when Williams just blitzed him, then he was sort of probably a bit all at sea psychologically.
Yes, yeah, I think Mark just played so well. He'd have beaten almost anybody that day. But again, I'm sure Sean will be back to the practice table. I saw that he was happy to get home to he's got a new dog called Elton that he seems very happy to be at home with. So
Yes.
I'm sure there are always pluses to going back home these days. But moving on, a couple of others from the last 16. Ronnie beat Chang Bingyu 6-5. And don't know what you saw of this, Scott, but Chang, I think, was a 5-3 up, and he should really have won the match, but Ronnie didn't give in, which was good to see.
5-2 up Chang wasn't. As Dave Henton said in later matches, he looked back possibly on chances to beat him. But yeah, so Sullivan's battling qualities, particularly so early in the season when, you know, we questioned it on this podcast, haven't we? Uh, you know, does he have the hunger anymore? Well, those questions were well and truly answered this week, and particularly there against Chan Bing Yu. But so very well played and great to see Ronnie actually digging in a bit.
Absolutely. I think that was the most pleasing thing. Win or lose, he looked like he wanted to be there. I know he has a very good relationship with the Saudi partners. I think he's sponsored by, Riyadh, and he's just doing very well. It's good to see him back playing how we know he can do. So that was Ronnie into the quarterfinals. And finally, Chris Wakeling beat Xing Tong 6-5. And this was a really, really good game for Wakeling to win. He's looking
Yeah.
massively improved in his game and his confidence and self-belief. So, yeah, Wakeling, really good to see him going well. And after his run to the quarters at the Crucible, this was another big event for him to be doing well in, and he'll be shooting up those rankings, Scott.
Yes, I mean, the thing I would say about Wakeland, he's very similar to Kyron in the sense. He's very similar in the sense that he always, is grateful for what snooker has given him. And you like to see players of that sort doing well. And he's improved no end. I mean, not only the quarterfinal crucible, but the international championship final uh, last season where he lost to Ding, of course. Obviously he's won the shootout as well, but it's wonderful to see someone who's so, I hate to use the word normal, but you know what I mean, sort of relatable, young daughter and you know
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, and I think he's a very likable guy. Like you say with Kyron, he doesn't seem to get that excited or above himself in any way. He just goes about his game and plays. And I think we'll be seeing him winning a ranking tournament maybe this season. I think he might be the next first time winner, but we'll see. Um,
yeah.
so moving on to the quarterfinals, first one up was Neil Robertson beating Carter 6-4. It was close in the final scoreline, but I never thought it looked like Robbo would lose that, Scott. He had a 139 in the second frame. Carter hit a 75 and an 80, but I always thought that he was always ahead, and I always thought he was going to win that one.
Well, I suppose, I mean, we'll get to the final in a moment, but I would say that, if you have been the better player, but then you've been forced to battle a bit, it's sort of it's a double plus in my book, because if you win 6-0 with 6 centuries, in a sense, yes, you played very well, but you might have maxed yourself out in a sense, no pun intended. Uh, but the fact that, yes, he was always ahead, but he had to battle means that, both he's playing well, but also his mental reserves are very strong. So it was good to see that from Neil.
Yes, I think he's well and truly back. To be honest, he had a disappointment in Sheffield losing to Wakeling, but yeah, I think he's back, and well, we'll see as we go through the tournament. He's well and truly back. Next quarter final up, Elliot Slesser beat Mark Williams 6-5. I watched this all the way through. This was really good quality. Both played well, but Slesser got over the line to guarantee by far his biggest payday. Um, Mark, yes, he could have won it, but he lost it. I don't think there was that much in it. But Slesser, he held himself together very well because he was well ahead. I think he was 5-2 ahead, and Williams got back to 5-all, or it was at least 5-3. And Slesser did hold himself together in that decider because it looked like that might have been one that got away from him. And it's good to see because I think like Wakeling, he's a much improved player as well. So, yeah, good to see him doing well.
Yes, yes, I mean, Slasher I think he's up to, or he was at one stage up to 26 in the world.
Yes,
So,
and I I think he's only going to go up as well. He has
Yes.
improved. He doesn't. He's worked so hard on his temperament in the last year or so, he says, and you can see that because he wasn't getting. He doesn't get annoyed like he ever used to. You used to watch him, and if things did go against him, then you could see that he was getting annoyed. But good to see, and a semi-final spot in this big money event will only do his confidence the world of good. But next quarter final, we've got Ronnie, who beat Kyron 6-5. Now, this was a real cracker. Ronnie was looking very solid and so much better than he'd been at Sheffield. Kyron played very well too and led 5-3. And to put 2 quick centuries from the Rocket, soon had it at 5-all. And it was the 7 times world champion who came through the decider. This was a great game, Scott.
Yes, I would say this, and obviously we'll get to the semi-final performance whereby, we all know what happened there. But in terms of actually going forward for the rest of the season, I would probably say that this was, the best one if you're looking for omens as to what O'Sullivan, you know, will do for the rest of the season because he really had to battle, and particularly given that Kyron had beaten him in Shanghai. And he mentioned in 2 or 3 of his interviews this week that he's playing better, and it was just Kyron in Shanghai that put him to the sword, if you like. But the fact he's got a bit of revenge and he's actually stopped a bit of a rot against Kyron, he'd lost 6 on the bounce before that one, will fill him with a lot of confidence, I think.
Yes, and what I liked about Ronnie as well all week before we get to the semi-finals and the final is that he was doing interviews and he was talking properly. He looked, at the table. He wasn't really getting frustrated. I think he did have one cue bang in the final, but he looks the real deal again now, and he's got this new cue from Sonny Akani that he seems very happy with. And I think it's good for us and good for snooker if Ronnie's in the right frame of mind and wants to be doing well again.
I
Maybe
mean,
getting married in the summer's probably done him some good for stability off the table as well.
yes, I mean, shall we, or have we got through all the quarters yet?
Just one left to mention, and that was Chris Wakeling beat Barry Hawkins another 6-5. So all the quarters were very good. It was another decent match. Hawkins was the victim of the ding curse, which I'm sure we all know about that now. Wakeling setting up a semi-final against Ronnie. And along with Elliot Slezzer, he's guaranteed his biggest payday now. And like I say, I do feel Wakeling will win a tournament this season because he's just been playing so very well.
Well, one doesn't want to overshadow the final, but shall we get to the main event?
Let's go to the semi-finals, eh? We'll go in order just because the other one was played first. But Neil Robertson beat Elliot 6-3. Robbo was always in front and comfortable in this one, and Slezer's levels dropped. So it was a comfortable win for the Aussie. But it was a tremendous week for Elliot, a boost up the rankings and to his bank balance, and surely will give him the confidence to get to this stage a bit more often. Robbo played well though, very solid, and with Joe Perry in his corner, the sky's the limit for him. And this is a big final for Robertson to have reached. So, yeah, very well done to him. But the second semi-final, now, I feel like we haven't had that much opportunity to wax lyrical about Ronnie since we started this podcast, Scott, because he didn't play so much last season and never played very well. But here we are. He beat Chris Wakeling 6-3. And where to start with this one? 2 147s, winning the double maximum prize, was the highlight in a sublime performance that also had all the total clearances of 142 and 134. Wakeling, to his credit, was 3-all at one point, though, so it tells you that he was playing well himself. But no one lives with Ronnie when he's in that frame of mind and that form. Even Ronnie himself said afterwards that he doesn't get much better than that. It was phenomenal snooker.
I mean, it was. I mean, whatever might be said about Ronnie, and a lot could be said, you cannot deny that he is probably one of the finest sportsmen the country has ever produced. I mean, that was just extraordinary. I mean, Chris Wakeland probably had the best sick night. He didn't have to pay for a ticket. I mean, that was tremendous. It really was.
It was absolutely incredible. I mean, I was out on Friday night, and I met up with a friend after work, and we were keeping an eye on the scores. And actually, Scott, I couldn't wait to get home to start watching this match because I'd seen and heard what was going on. But 2-1-4-7s in a match though, and when Jackson Page did it last year, we thought, wow, that's probably never going to happen again, two in the same match. But I think Ronnie said, well, hold my beer, here I am.
Yes, and I was glad that it was O'Sullivan that did it because, there were questions. I mean, let's not speak about the bush. There were questions about, would O'Sullivan play much this season? Never mind anything else. And, he's answered those. And I mean, that's the sort of thing, like, whatever may be said about him, that is the sort of thing. That's why he's been the talisman for this last 30 odd years. That's why he was, he has won what he's won. It's that level of performance. Now, clearly, he doesn't reach that level of performance every day. But I mean, that's one of those O'Sullivan performances that will go down in the history books for years.
Absolutely. And Ronnie isn't necessarily my favourite player, but I love watching him when he's playing anything like that. And he just made me so excited. I felt on a high. I just felt high on snooker and
I
high
know.
on life, to quote
I
George
know.
Walcombe song. I just felt so good watching that, and it made me feel, wow, I'm so glad that snooker is my sport. And yeah, I was really, if I'm honest, I was probably rooting a little bit more for Ronnie in the final just because he'd made me feel like that in the semis. But yeah, so yeah, Ronnie had guaranteed a massive payday. He'd taken 2/3 of Tetshires 50 grand prize. He'd won the 147 grand for making two across the big events. And that was all before we moved to the final, Scott. Ronnie against Neil Robertson. Now, this wasn't a bad old match in its own right.
No, it certainly wasn't. But I'm going to say this. This might sound a bit weird, but after the antics of the Friday night, I actually made Robertson the slight favourite because, there was way on earth Ronnie was going to replicate that form over. Well, I mean, he might do it over a best of 19, but highly unlikely that you would produce that sort of form two matches in a row. And particularly with no disrespect to Elliot, but slightly better opposition as well. It was unlikely, and I thought therefore that Neil, had more than a 50% chance, shall we say.
And well, especially after the afternoon session, because they came out and for the second year running, we were treated to a thrilling final. Neil led 6-2 after the first session, though, and he was much the more solid. Ronnie didn't quite have he didn't have in the tank what he'd produced the night before. But moving into the final session, it went 7-2. And I thought we were in for a short evening, Scott, but again, Ronnie had other ideas. Sprung to life with breaks of 139, 97, 89, 57, and an 80. And in the blink of an eye, it was 7 frames all. Um,
Yeah.
they traded frames. Ronnie was looking strong now. I thought he would win it. He led 9-8, but a 101 by Neil took us all the way. So for the second year in a row, 9-all. Ronnie was then first in the decider, led 39-0, but Neil took the win, his biggest ever payday, and said his slip down the rankings in tough times, this was probably his biggest ever win. Disappointment for Ronnie, but was good to see him playing well again, and those semi-final efforts will live long in the memory. And a very good week for snooker overall, I thought.
Yes, probably one of my favourite finals of recent times, really. I mean, particularly that 38 minute 16th frame I thought that was extraordinary. But I was actually thinking of you when I was reflecting on it, because I thought, what other final has there been where one player has had a big lead, the other player has brought them back to a decider, and then the player who was initially in the lead has won it anyway. Can you guess which match I was thinking of?
Oh, the 1997 Charity Challenge final.
Correct.
Yeah, that was a very memorable one for me, of course, because it was my first live one. But yeah,
But it was very similar in that sense that,
it was very similar in that Hendry went so far ahead playing brilliant. Ronnie again was the one to come back in that final, as he did in this one. And Hendry just pipped him in that final with a 147, which we'll never forget, or I won't anyway.
yeah,
But yeah, Neil, very, very well done to Neil. Joe Perry
yeah,
was there with him, and you could see what it meant to him. Neil was really emotional at the end of it.
yeah.
And this will do him the world of good confidence-wise going forward as now. He's up to number 3 in the rankings again and well and truly back.
And I think we forget how big a sacrifice it has been for Robertson because, particularly in that period between 2006 and 2020, I think it was, when he won a tournament every year, we just got so used to seeing him win that that we forgot how big a sacrifice it was to come from Australia and whatever. If anyone wants more on that, by the way, I would recommend to read Dave Henton's Substack from this morning. He just wrote it after I got up and had my breakfast this morning, so it was quite easy to find. But no, it was wonderful to see Neil so raw in a sense, and it really underlined for us again what an extraordinary player he is, and I was delighted for him.
Absolutely, I can't say good enough about him and his efforts. So that wraps up Saudi Arabia, Scott, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks after the Wuhan Open, which
Yes,
begins in a week's
that'll do.
time.
Then. Oh, by the way, I do have my trivia question before we finish, and
Oh
my
yes, go
question for
ahead.
this week is this: who was O'Sullivan's last maximum opponent? Who was the opponent the last time O'Sullivan made a maximum break? But that will do for next time. We'll be back after Wuhan, and I'll see you then, Kelly, and we'll see you all in a few weeks' time. Bye, all.
Okay, bye, folks.
Bye, all.